The first time I realized hard work and recognition weren't the same thing, I was standing alone in a conference room at 8:15 on a rainy Monday morning, fixing a presentation that my manager had promised to finish over the weekend. He never touched it. The meeting started at 9. The client never knew. Neither did anyone else. That became my career in a nutshell. My name is Daniel Carter. I'm 46 years old. I've spent nearly 2 decades in corporate operations. I drive the same silver Toyota Camry I've owned for 9 years. And my idea of excitement is leaving work before sunset on a Friday. People usually mistake quiet for weak. I've learned to let them, because quiet people hear everything. When I joined Westbridge Logistics 17 years earlier, the company occupied half of a warehouse outside Columbus. There were 30 employees. Everyone knew everyone's spouse, kids, birthdays, and coffee order. The founder, Richard Evans, believed something most executives only pretended to believe. The business exists because of the people doing the work. He said it often. More importantly, he lived it. If the warehouse was shorthanded, Richard grabbed a pallet jack. If accounting stayed late, he ordered dinner. If a customer called angry, he answered personally. Nobody was too important to help. That's why people stayed. I started as a scheduling coordinator. Nothing glamorous. I spent my days solving problems nobody else wanted. Delayed trucks. Missing inventory. Drivers stuck in snowstorms. Customers threatening lawsuits. The work wasn't exciting. It was necessary. Richard noticed that. About 5 years after I joined, he called me into his office. "You know why clients ask for you?" he asked. I shrugged. "They trust that you'll tell them the truth." He smiled. "Never lose that." I never did. The company grew. 30 employees became 100. One warehouse became 6. Eventually, we had regional offices across 3 states. Growth changes companies. Some changes are good. Some aren't. Richard fought hard to keep the culture intact. For years he succeeded. Then cancer arrived. Fast. Within 8 months, the man who built the company couldn't climb the stairs without stopping to catch his breath. He still came to work. Still remembered birthdays. Still walked through the warehouse every Friday. The day before he started medical leave, he stopped by my desk. "Take care of the place. Not run it. Not protect me. Just take care of the place." At the time, I thought he meant while he recovered. None of us imagined those would be the last words he'd ever say to me. Richard passed away 6 weeks later. The funeral filled an entire church. Drivers came from 3 different states. Warehouse workers stood beside executives. Customers attended. Competitors even sent flowers. That's the kind of respect money can't buy. His son Ethan Evans became CEO less than 10 days later. Nobody was surprised. Family businesses usually stay in the family. The board called it continuity. Most employees called it inevitable. I tried to keep an open mind. Ethan was 34. MBA. Expensive suits. Perfect hair. Perfect smile. The kind of confidence that comes from never wondering whether you'll have a place at the table. During his first company-wide meeting, he stood on the stage with a wireless microphone and said, "We're entering a new era." Corporate jargon followed. Transformation. Innovation. Agility. Disruption. Synergy. Every buzzword you've ever heard somehow found its way into a 40-minute speech. When it ended, nobody really knew what had been said. Only that everything was apparently about to change. The changes started immediately. Long-standing managers were replaced by younger hires with impressive resumes and very little practical experience. Departments were reorganized. Reporting structures changed. Meetings multiplied. Actual work somehow became harder to accomplish. Then Ethan brought in his closest friend from business school, Marcus Hill. Official title: Executive Strategy Director. Actual experience in logistics? Almost none. Marcus loved presentations. He loved whiteboards. He loved saying things like, "We need to think bigger." He rarely explained how. 3 months later, another new face began appearing around the office. Victoria Evans. Ethan's aunt. She wasn't employed by the company. She had no official title, no email address, no office. Yet somehow she attended leadership meetings. She walked through departments giving unsolicited advice. She commented on hiring decisions. She criticized marketing campaigns. She even started reviewing customer proposals before they were sent. Nobody knew who had authorized it. Nobody asked. When the CEO's family starts acting like management, most people decide silence is safer. Including me. First, Victoria had a remarkable talent. She could insult someone while smiling warmly enough that everyone else questioned whether an insult had even happened. One afternoon she stopped beside my desk. Oh, she looked at my spreadsheets. I didn't realize people still formatted reports like this. I smiled politely. They've worked well for years. She tilted her head. Well, tradition has its place. Then she walked away. The analyst sitting across from me waited until she disappeared around the corner. What was that? I shrugged. No idea. But I knew. It wasn't about spreadsheets. It was about reminding everyone who belonged. And who didn't. Over the following months, projects I'd managed for years quietly disappeared from my calendar. Clients I worked with for over a decade were reassigned. Meetings happened without me. Nobody explained why. Whenever I asked, the answers sounded rehearsed. We're trying a fresh approach. We need different perspectives. It's nothing personal. Those phrases always mean the same thing. It's already personal. One Friday afternoon, Ethan stopped by my office. Daniel. He smiled. We're promoting Tyler to Senior Operations Manager. Tyler. 29 years old. Bright. Ambitious. Smart enough. He'd been with the company 14 months. I'd like you to mentor him. I looked at Ethan for a moment. Congratulations to him. I knew you'd understand. Understand. Interesting choice of words. Not agree. Not support. Understand. As though the decision had never really involved me. That evening, I stayed late finishing reports Tyler hadn't learned how to prepare yet. Around 7:30, I walked through the nearly empty building. Richard's old office lights were off. The nameplate had already been replaced. I stopped outside the glass door for just a second. The office looked completely different now. Modern furniture. New artwork. Brighter colors. It was nicer. Cleaner. More expensive. But somehow, it no longer felt like the same company. I didn't know it then, but that quiet feeling in the hallway wasn't disappointment. It was the first warning that the place I'd helped build was slowly becoming something else. And before long, I would discover exactly how far the new leadership was willing to go to push the old guard out of the way. The next 6 months taught me something nobody tells you about corporate politics. People don't usually push you out all at once. They erase you one meeting at a time. One decision at a time. One invitation you never receive. Until one day you realize everyone remembers what you used to do. But nobody asks you to do it anymore. Tyler's promotion changed more than his title. Suddenly he was leading projects he'd never touched before. Guess who prepared his reports? Guess who explained client histories before every meeting? Guess who stayed late correcting mistakes after everyone else had gone home? Me. Officially, I wasn't managing those accounts anymore. Unofficially, I was still keeping them alive. One afternoon Tyler walked into my office carrying a notebook. I need your help. What's going on? The Jensen account. I smiled. What about it? He looked embarrassed. They asked about a pricing adjustment from 2019. I nodded. I remember. You do. Of course. I opened an old folder on my computer. There was a warehouse fire at one of their suppliers. We renegotiated their transportation rates for 6 months. Tyler stared at me. How do you remember that? I shrugged. When you've worked with people long enough, you remember the things that mattered to them. He wrote everything down. The next morning, Ethan congratulated Tyler for handling the client brilliantly. Tyler thanked him. He never mentioned where the answers had come from. I didn't expect him to. Victoria became more involved every week. Nobody introduced her. Nobody questioned her. She simply appeared. One Tuesday she interrupted a budgeting meeting halfway through my presentation. I have a suggestion. The room went silent. She walked to the screen and pointed at one of my charts. This looks cold. I blinked. It's an operating cost analysis. Exactly. She smiled. Could we make it feel more positive? Nobody laughed. Nobody spoke. Ethan nodded thoughtfully. I like that idea. I looked around the room. Most people suddenly became fascinated by their laptops. I spent the next 3 hours redesigning financial charts to look more engaging. The numbers stayed exactly the same. Only the colors changed. Apparently that counted as innovation. Clients noticed the difference before management did. Or maybe management noticed. They simply refused to admit it. One of our oldest customers requested a meeting. Michael Reynolds had worked with Westbridge almost as long as I had. He closed the conference room door behind us. Can I ask you something? Sure. What's happening here? I hesitated. What do you mean? You've changed account managers 3 times in 4 months. He leaned forward. Every new person asks questions you answered years ago. I stayed quiet. They don't know our business. Another pause. I keep seeing that woman. I knew immediately who he meant. Victoria? Who is she? I chose my words carefully. She's part of the Evans family. Michael frowned. Is she an executive? No. Does she work here? Not officially. He stared at me for several seconds. That explains more than you think. The annual leadership conference arrived in October. Richard used to treat it like a thank you event. Employees, customers, partners. Everyone spent 2 days sharing ideas instead of selling themselves. This year the conference felt different. Everything was bigger, more expensive, more polished, less genuine. Marcus had arranged giant video walls, professional lighting, music before every presentation. It looked impressive. The content was another story. Buzzwords replaced practical solutions. Motivational speeches replaced useful workshops. Customers smiled politely. Many left early. On the second evening we hosted a networking dinner. I spent most of it introducing clients to department managers. Around 8 o'clock I stepped away to answer a phone call from one of our warehouse supervisors. A shipment had been delayed by bad weather. Nothing unusual. By the time I returned, Victoria was standing near the dessert table talking to 2 executives from one of our largest accounts. As I walked past, she turned toward me. Oh, Daniel. Her voice carried farther than necessary. Perfect timing. She handed me an empty wine glass. Would you mind finding someone to clean this? I looked at the glass, then at her. There are servers right behind you. She smiled. I know. She held the glass a little closer. But you're so dependable. Neither executive said a word. I took the glass, walked 3 steps, placed it on a passing server's tray, then continued toward the exit without looking back. The conversation behind me stopped. For a brief moment, the ballroom felt strangely quiet. The following Monday, HR emailed me. Subject: Career Development Discussion. Interesting title. The meeting lasted 11 minutes. The HR manager smiled constantly. We've received feedback. What kind of feedback? Some members of leadership feel you've become resistant. Resistant to what? She glanced at her notes. New ideas. I waited. Could you give me an example? Another pause. Nothing specific. Of course, nothing specific. Just vague enough to become impossible to defend against. By November I wasn't just being excluded. I was being replaced. Tyler attended executive meetings. Marcus began reviewing my department. Victoria occasionally walked through my office without knocking. One afternoon I returned from lunch and found her sitting in my chair. Actually sitting in it. She was flipping through printed reports on my desk. Oh. She looked up casually. I was just curious how you organize things. I kept my voice calm. Those contain confidential customer information. She stood slowly. I'm family. As if that explained everything. As if being related to the CEO automatically granted access to years of client data. She walked toward the door. Just before leaving she stopped. You've done good work here. Good. Past tense. Then she smiled. But every company eventually needs fresh energy. After she disappeared into the hallway, I closed my office door for the first time in years. Not because I was angry, because something finally became clear. This wasn't about improving the business. It wasn't about new leadership. It wasn't even about me. The decisions had already been made. The only thing left was figuring out how long they intended to keep pretending otherwise. December arrived with the kind of cold that made people hurry from their cars to the office without looking up. Inside Westbridge, though, the atmosphere was even colder. Conversations stopped when certain people walked by. Managers suddenly became careful with every email they sent. People who had once shared ideas freely now measured every sentence. Nobody wanted to become the next person labeled resistant to change. I kept doing my job, not because anyone seemed to notice anymore, because clients still depended on us. One Thursday morning, I received a call from Horizon Manufacturing, one of our oldest accounts. Their distribution center had lost power overnight. 3 truckloads of medical equipment were sitting in freezing temperatures. Every hour mattered. Without waiting for permission, I contacted 2 partner warehouses, rerouted 4 drivers, arranged temporary storage, and personally stayed on the phone until nearly midnight. The problem was solved. The client avoided hundreds of thousands of dollars in losses. The next morning, Horizon's CEO sent a company-wide thank you email. Except my name wasn't mentioned. The message praised Tyler for excellent leadership during a challenging situation. Tyler hadn't answered a single phone call that night. He'd gone home before 6. I stared at the email for a few seconds, then closed it. Recognition had stopped surprising me. Or rather, the lack of it had. 2 days later, Tyler knocked on my office door. He looked uncomfortable. "Can I come in?" "Of course." He closed the door behind him. "I owe you an apology." I looked up. "For what?" "The Horizon situation. You handled the presentation well, Daniel." He sighed. "I know who actually fixed everything." Neither of us spoke for a moment. Finally he said quietly, "I tried to tell Ethan. And he said leadership isn't about who makes the calls. What is it about?" Tyler looked embarrassed. "Visibility." That single word explained the entire company. Visibility. Not results. Not trust. Not experience. Just visibility. The final board meeting of the year was scheduled for the week before Christmas. Department heads were asked to present annual performance summaries. For 17 years, I had always delivered the operations report. This year, Marcus informed me someone else would be presenting. Tyler needs executive exposure. So I prepared the report. "I know." He smiled politely. "He'll do the presentation." I nodded once. "No problem." It wasn't worth arguing. The decision had already been made. The boardroom was almost full when I arrived. Directors, senior managers, regional supervisors, even a few outside consultants. Victoria was there too. Naturally. Still no title. Still sitting near the front. As though she belonged. Tyler presented the operations review. The slides looked familiar. Because I had built every one of them. The numbers were mine. The forecasts were mine. Even the wording on several pages was copied directly from my draft. He did a respectable job. I genuinely hoped he would succeed. My frustration wasn't with him anymore. It was with the people pretending experience could simply be replaced by confidence. Halfway through the meeting, one of the independent board members interrupted. His name was Robert Sinclair. Retired. 70 years old. Quiet. Richard had trusted him more than almost anyone. He adjusted his glasses. "I have a question." Tyler nodded. "Of course." Page 23. Tyler clicked forward. "The inventory recovery model." "Yes." Robert looked around the room. "Who designed this process?" Silence. Tyler hesitated. Marcus answered first. "Our operations team." Robert kept looking. "No." Another pause. I asked who designed it. Nobody spoke. Finally Tyler turned toward me. "Daniel did." Robert nodded slowly. "I thought so." He closed the report. "I remember approving the pilot program 8 years ago." Another long silence filled the room. Then he asked the question nobody expected. "Why isn't he giving this presentation?" You could almost hear people stop breathing. Marcus smiled. "We're developing new leadership." Robert didn't look convinced. "So the person with the experience writes the report." He glanced toward Tyler. And someone else receives the credit? Nobody answered. The meeting continued, but something had shifted. People became cautious. Even Ethan seemed irritated. When it finally ended, Robert caught up with me near the elevators. You have a minute? Sure. We walked toward the lobby. I knew your former boss well. I know. He trusted your judgment. I smiled politely. He trusted a lot of people. Robert stopped walking. No. He looked directly at me. He trusted very few. There was something unusual in his voice. Almost concern. I've been watching what's happening here. I stayed quiet. I don't like it. Neither did I. But saying so wouldn't change anything. As if reading my thoughts, Robert reached into his briefcase and handed me a business card. My personal number. I looked at it. If things become difficult. He paused carefully. Call me before making any permanent decisions. I slipped the card into my wallet. I appreciate that. He nodded once. So did Richard. Then he walked away. 3 days later the email arrived. Subject: Mandatory HR meeting. Time Monday, 9 a.m. Attendance required. No explanation. No agenda. Just a calendar invitation. I stared at the screen for a long time. Outside my office window, employees hurried across the parking lot carrying Christmas gifts and coffee cups, laughing about holiday plans. Inside, my inbox remained strangely quiet. Almost too quiet. After 17 years in the same company, you learn to recognize certain patterns. Projects disappear. Meetings stop. Responsibilities shrink. Then comes HR. I leaned back in my chair and looked around the office that had been my second home for nearly 2 decades. The framed client awards. The old warehouse photo Richard had given every department manager. The shelves filled with binders documenting thousands of solved problems. 17 years. Reduced to 1 calendar invitation. For the first time since Richard's death, I had the unmistakable feeling that Monday morning wasn't going to be a conversation. It was going to be a verdict. Monday morning arrived exactly on time. Unlike justice. I parked in my usual spot at 8:10, walked through the front doors, said good morning to the receptionist, made myself a cup of black coffee, answered 3 client emails. Everything felt strangely normal, almost rehearsed. People smiled a little too politely. Managers avoided eye contact. By 8:55 I finished my coffee, straightened my tie, and walked toward conference room B. The HR meeting had already begun. Inside the room sat Ethan, Marcus, the HR director Linda, and of course, Victoria. She wasn't an employee. She had no reason to be there. Yet somehow she occupied the chair closest to Ethan. Nobody questioned it. Linda offered an uncomfortable smile. Good morning, Daniel. Morning. I sat down. A folder rested neatly in front of Linda. She folded her hands. Thank you for coming. Ethan leaned back in his chair. We'll keep this brief. Something about the confidence in his voice told me the decision had been made long before I entered the room. Linda cleared her throat. Over the past several months we've received concerns regarding your adaptability. I waited. She continued. There have also been questions about your long-term fit within the company's evolving culture. I looked at her. Can you give me one example? She opened the folder, closed it again. We've gathered feedback from leadership. I asked for an example. Silence. Marcus finally spoke. The issue isn't one specific event. What is it then? It's your overall approach. My approach has helped keep this department running for 17 years. Victoria smiled gently. Nobody is questioning your dedication. There it was. The sentence people use just before they question everything. Ethan slid a document across the table. We've decided it's time to move in a different direction. I looked at the paper. Termination agreement. 17 years summarized in 6 pages. Health insurance. Unused vacation days. A standard severance package. Nothing more. Linda pushed a pen toward me. If you sign today, everything can be processed immediately. I didn't touch it. Instead I looked at Ethan. Can I ask you one question? He nodded confidently. Of course. When was the last time you spoke with one of our warehouse supervisors? He frowned. I'm not sure. When was the last time you answered a customer call after business hours? Silence. When was the last time you solved a shipping emergency yourself? Marcus shifted in his chair. This isn't relevant. It is. I looked around the room. You've spent the last year talking about transformation. I paused. But you stopped talking to the people who actually keep this company running. Nobody answered. Ethan sighed. Daniel. His voice sounded almost sympathetic. This business has to evolve. I agree. That surprised him. It should evolve. I stood slowly. But evolution isn't the same thing as replacing experience with appearances. Victoria crossed her arms. You sound bitter. No. I smiled for the first time that morning. I'm disappointed. There's a difference. I picked up the termination papers, folded them once, placed them back on the table. I won't be signing today. Linda looked nervous. You're entitled to review them. I intend to. I removed my employee badge, set it beside the folder. Then I reached into my briefcase and took out a single envelope, plain white, unmarked. I slid it across the table toward Ethan. What's this? A list. He opened it. His expression changed almost immediately. 32 names. Every major client I had personally managed during the last decade. Beside each name was a contact person, a contract renewal date, and one handwritten note. Relationship based primarily on personal trust with Daniel Carter. Marcus laughed nervously. What is this supposed to prove? Nothing. I looked at Ethan. I just thought you should know who has been calling me privately over the last 2 weeks. The room became very quiet. I haven't asked anyone to leave Westbridge. That part was true. I haven't contacted your clients. Also true. But after word started spreading that I was being pushed out, I shrugged. People began calling me. Linda looked confused. Why? Because relationships take years to build. I looked directly at Ethan. And trust doesn't automatically transfer with a promotion. He looked back at the list. Several of those accounts represented millions of dollars in annual revenue. They're asking where I'm going next. Nobody spoke. I honestly don't know. That was the truth. I haven't accepted another job. I pushed the envelope a little closer. But whichever company hires me. I let the sentence hang. We'll probably receive a few phone calls. No threat. Just reality. For the first time since Richard died. Ethan looked uncertain. Not angry. Not defensive. Just uncertain. Because numbers on a spreadsheet are easy to replace. People aren't. Trust isn't. Reputation isn't. I picked up my coat. 17 years ago your father hired me because he believed character mattered. I looked around the room one last time. I hope someday this company remembers that. No dramatic speech. No slammed doors. No shouting. I simply walked out. People expected me to leave quietly. Instead, something unexpected happened. Within 3 months, 4 of Westbridge's largest customers moved part of their business to the company that hired me. Not because I asked them to. They called me. They wanted someone they trusted. Several former coworkers followed over the next year. Again. Not because I recruited them. Because they were tired of being managed by presentations instead of leaders. About 18 months later I heard that Ethan had resigned after the board demanded major changes. Marcus left shortly afterward. Victoria stopped visiting the office altogether. The company survived. Most businesses do. But it never fully recovered the culture Richard had spent decades building. That part couldn't be restored with consultants or strategy meetings. Culture isn't created in boardrooms. It's built in ordinary moments. Late nights. Honest conversations. People keeping promises when nobody is watching. I still drive the same silver Camry. I still arrive early. I still answer client calls myself. Sometimes younger employees ask how I managed to stay calm when everything seemed to be falling apart. The answer is simple. Titles come and go. Offices change. Companies change. But if people trust your work, you never really start over. You simply begin the next chapter.